Good evening to everyone in the audience. I would like to warmly welcome everyone to this panel discussion from Kyiv to Tel Aviv, the new front lines between the East and the West. In this discussion, we'll be talking about the situation in Ukraine, the situation in Israel, the developing geopolitical currents around these conflicts, and also the deeper implications in and out of theater. And at that same momentum, I would like to welcome Or Yisar, the vice president of the research and content of the Israeli Defense and Security Forum. Hi, hello.
Good to be with you.
And I would also like to welcome Vladislav Solovyeski, Lieutenant Colonel of the AFU of the 3rd Assault Brigade. Hello.
Good evening.
And with this momentum, we'll get right into it with the first question. Today, a lot has already happened. It is the 1,000th day of the war in Ukraine. The Russians have passed a new nuclear doctrine, allowing for a lot of ambiguity in interpreting their position, while there's also surprising hope in developments between the relations between Israel and Ukraine, with anti-air capabilities, more specifically about early warning systems. So there's a lot of good hope to be spread around. And with that, we'll get right into it. Gentlemen, how has drone warfare evolved in Israel and Ukraine since the outbreak of the war? And to what extent are they dominating and or dictating the battlefield dynamics? Or we'll start with you.
Thank you, Benjamin. I would say that the drone threat coming out into Israel and Ukraine is one component out of a big puzzle. And this piece out of this puzzle is actually assembled together with other types of weapons, but also intentions. And I can see the drones as symbolizing the cooperation, not just between Russia and Iran, but also the larger axis that challenges Western hegemony around the world. So both in Tel Aviv and in Kyiv, we see people rush to the shelters by threat of Iranian drones launched from Iran itself, launched by Iran's proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis in Yemen. And in Kyiv and around Ukraine, Iranian-made drones launched by the Russian military. Recently, we learned that North Korean soldiers were even stationed on Russian territory in order to participate in the war against Ukraine. So all that teaches us that this is really not a local war, as we often like to think of it, Russia against Ukraine or even Israel against Hamas. We're talking about a global new Cold War, potentially, where Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea bond together to form some sort of an alliance, interspace alliance against the Western rules-based international order. And in that sense, Israel and Ukraine are both part of the same front line of defense of the West against this axis. Drones really do signify a new type of challenge, which we will, I'm sure, discuss at length, both in terms of air defense and the challenges it poses to the national capability to deal with projectiles, but also the kind of common threat it presents both to Israel and to Ukraine. Is that's estimated that over 8,000 drones made by Iran were launched by Russia into Ukrainian territory. Numbers, of course, vary. And several thousand drones were launched by Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis toward Israel. So the more we learn how to really make the best use out of this common threat, to present a unified front, I believe we can actually channel this very challenging era into full-fledged cooperation between Israel, Ukraine, and the West against the radical axis.
Thank you for these starting thoughts. Vladislav.
Yes, thank you. I can add Iranian, Chinese, North Korean drones become Russian. They can produce Iranian technologies in Alabuga site and other places, and produce more and more drones to face Ukrainian forces on all the levels, strategic, tactical, and Western world have to respond because Ukraine alone cannot deal with Russia and also cannot deal with Russia, North Korea, Iran, and other allies like Belarus, and with their abilities to build, to provide, to produce, and improve all the drone technologies. We also have some experience to share in this topic, but we can do something. Not we cannot remove this problem, and we cannot end this war alone. But with ally like Israel, also Israel, we can do something with our common enemy. And I cannot explain you how many names except Shahed we now have in our air. Also, in maybe 1 hour, Kyiv will have another alert, another air threat with another Gerbera, Shahed, Zala, Orlan 10, Orlan 30, and it will be some threats will be without answer from our side. And I think in a time we can deal with this something. Thank you.
All right. Well, we've heard amazing inputs about how global the issue really is in both theaters, that both countries are not really facing against one country, but rather a uniquely coalesced and united in purpose against the rules based international order in both theaters. Now, both of you have mentioned the sheer amount of drones that are targeting both countries, and especially in the last years now Ukraine specifically. And I just wanted to briefly touch upon the topic of this mass production issue, the economical aspect, really, of how to approach this issue. I just wanted to get a couple of opinions about how Israel is approaching this issue. And we'll start with Or.
Yeah, so ways to deal with drones vary. Usually, when a drone is launched on the part of Hezbollah, for example, the northern border is quite close by. The challenge here is really timing and quick reaction, and so usually air defense systems could miss it. What happened, for example, with a drone that was targeting Netanyahu's home just the other week, that penetrated from Hezbollah. Really, there was a video of it bypassing a combat helicopter and continuing southward. The sheer short distance from Lebanon across the border into Israel really makes it very complicated to intercept. And usually these are F-16 combat helicopter or other means to intercept it. Drones that actually fired from Iran. That was on April 14 when Iran launched some 350 projectiles into Israel. That included over 100 ballistic missiles, over 100 cruise missiles, and some 135 drones. These are usually either Iran, Hezbollah, Houthis, or Hamas. These are usually the Shahid drones, Shahid 131, 136. Sometimes these are also the Ababil family or the Mirsad. So there are various reports by the Congressional Research Center, various reports in the media and others that specify it. But the main way to deal with it when it comes from longer distances, around roughly 2,000-kilometer range, coming from Iran or from Yemen, would be F-35 planes, who actually intercept them far away from Israeli territory in many cases. And in some cases, air defense systems such as Arrow or even Iron Dome manage to intercept them. There's a real difficulty in dealing with this threat technologically. Israel is in the process of working on the laser system that's supposed to be extremely helpful. And this is still underway. It's far from being perfect. And we know that Ukraine also struggles with intercepting drones. There were roughly, I would say, according to the latest estimate by the IDF, roughly 1,200 drones launched during this war toward Israel, of which Israel managed to intercept the vast majority. A little over 200 crossed into Israeli territory. The rest crashed and most of them crashed in open airfields, but some of them did cause damage. There was a case where a drone crashed on a large community center where soldiers were staying. A drone that crashed directly on Netanyahu's bedroom when he wasn't there, just showing the extent of the gravity here. And drones crashing really in the middle of residential areas and military bases, the Golani base right north of Tel Aviv. All these things pose real challenges to air defense systems. And as long as the laser is not there or other more economic means to target them, that would still pose a challenge. I'm sure Ukraine deals with them, has a hard time to intercept them too. Just 2 days ago, the Russian and Iranian drones caused major casualties in Ukraine and power cuts. So these things continue to pose a major challenge.
Vladislav, your perspective.
Yeah, we have this problem in about 2.5 years, and we provide some hybrid solving. We're using electronic warfare for Shaheds, and some of them going to Belarus or returning to Russia. We're using mobile groups with machine guns. It's not effective like we want, but it's they can deal with some drones, something, yeah. And our new idea is using FPV drones to shut down recon drones and also Shaheds. Also, we can provide in the future some artificial intelligence in recognition, in target recognition. I think the price of putting down one missile or one drone, it can be cheaper if we will use FPV drones, and if we will use electronic warfare wider and wider in our area. You have to understand we the biggest country in Europe, and we have to deal with this. That's why if you wanna defend 5 cities, you have to have 5 Iron Domes.
Yes. So both of the panels have now highlighted the extremely precarious situations that's involved with how drone warfare has changed the element of targeting strategic infrastructure. Whether in this case in Israel, the proximity is a lot closer due to geography, whereas in Ukraine, it's exactly this geography that exemplifies the issue at hand. And we've also heard a lot about upcoming technologies, as Orr mentioned about lasers, and Vladislav about AI and electronic warfare. These are all things to watch out for. And with this, we'll go on to the second question, where I'll touch upon the increasingly closer connection amongst this now impromptu coalesced members of the resistance, as they're now called, referring to members such as North Korea, Iran, China, Russia, the Assad regime, and other proxy actors and non state actors such as Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. Hi, hello. I think it cut out. No, I'm here. So, in mind with these actors, what do you view these countries and non-state actors' roles now and in the future with respect to both of the theaters of conflict that are ongoing? Vladislav, we'll start with you.
Okay, a new axis can provide threats not only in Eastern Europe, but also in Taiwan, in Middle East, and in Africa. That's why we can call it axis, because it's not about 2 or 3 countries. about, I think, regions who will be threatened with China, Russia, and their allies in providing their own world, a new world. Uh, but uh, I think a role of some countries in the future we cannot uh, understand now, because we doesn't know when war will stop in Ukraine, when and where. That's why we have to understand that maybe this axis will change in a month. If it will be uh, like Korean variant in Ukraine, we can establish some new variants with warfare in Ukraine, because it will be hybrid. We will see some attacks on our facilities, on our homelands, but also if we will prolong our warfare and face new threats from Russia and its allies, we can see another threats for Western Europe, because it will be more refugees, it will be more political and economical problems for Ukraine, and I think a role uh, uh, for another countries who now participating in BRICS will be improved in our conflict.
Thank you very much. Or your take.
Right, so we can definitely see how this new axis is forming, and as Vladislav said, is posing an increased threat not just to Ukraine and Israel, but the entire free world. And what we see in Europe today is fascinating. We see really in the war in Ukraine, we see how this new axis taking form and taking shape is actually manifesting its new characteristics right in this war in Ukraine. We can see no longer conventional war between the Russian army and the Ukrainian army. In advance, not a very fair fight. But we can also see, as I said before, North Korean troops stationed on Russian territory ready to attack Ukraine. We saw Chinese soldiers for the first time in history on European soil maneuvering with their Russian counterparts in Belarus. And of course, Iran is an active participant in the war in Ukraine, selling missiles and drones to Russia. The latest intelligence estimates say that Russia actually manufactured over 4,000 such drones from the Shahed and Ababil family in Russian territory. An Iranian drone factory inside Russian territory that has been really pumping drones into the Russian war machine. And the same drones are then launched also into Israeli territory. So all of this axis is now taking shape. And the question we want to ask ourselves is what kind of dynamics this new world order will take us. I think Israel has long understood it is not just facing Hamas in Gaza or Hezbollah in Lebanon. It is really facing an Iranian campaign around the region. Remember how Prime Minister Netanyahu said that 90% of the problems in the Middle East derive from Iran. Well, in this war, it is very evident that all of these partners in that axis participate in one form or another in both the war in Israel and the war in Ukraine. The Iranian economy would not exist today without Chinese support. The main export of Iran is oil from the Khuzestan region. China now practically buys almost of Iran's oil, in spite of Western sanctions. Russia somehow participates as well in selling, if it sold a small portion of its oil once to China. Now it sells almost half its oil to China. So all these things really fuel into um, this question. We saw maybe the modern Ribbentrop-Molotov agreement today, where just a few days before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there was a strategic pact signed between Russia and China on an unlimited variety of topics, as they phrased it. So it's really a green light by China for Russia to attack Ukraine with no consequences. And the West, on its part, yes, the West participates. It gives Ukraine very recently $60 billion, over, if I'm not mistaken, over $150 billion of aid to Ukraine. It gives a large support to Ukraine in both weapons and economic aid. But we must ask ourselves whether allowing Ukraine, for example, to use long-range U.S.-made ballistic missiles against in Russian territory, as was recently confirmed, funneling economic aid, funneling weapons and ammunition, is all of this sufficient? Or are we on the verge of facing a very tough dilemma of the international community having to challenge Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea against really wreaking havoc around the Middle East and around Western Europe?
These are both amazing analyses. And yes, as we've observed in the past years of war in Ukraine now, and with the showing allegiances, and now the year-long conflict in the Middle East as well, and with Israel, it really isn't that different who they're fighting. I mean, sure, yes, the main proxy or adversary in the Middle East is Iran, and in the Ukraine conflict, it's Russia. But at the end of the day, they really are connected together with the economic support of China and the support of proxies to pressure both of these countries and their allies.
And
And
some
I just
soldiers
really
from
wanted to
North
dive.
Korea.
Yes. North Korea as well, with a bunch of ammunition, anti-tank equipment, which was showcased in the Kursk region, with now troops as well deployed within the territory of the Russian Federation. So recognizing these, yes, I want to go down a little bit in what Orr opened up in this can of worms is do we need to challenge the broader aspect of this resistance? And with this, I want to ask what this means from at least an Israeli perspective and what this means from a Ukrainian perspective. Because I think there is indeed a lot of merit to not just cure the problem, but really go after the cause of the problem. Because Iran couldn't fight for this long, neither could Russia if they would have no support at all. Vladislav?
Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
What do you about this axis of resistance or this grander Russia, North Korea, Iran, etc.? What do you think about what Orr said about tackling the issue head on, not just going after Russia, not just going after Iran, but going after this entire bunch of countries, the North Koreans, the Chinese, tackling the problem as one, not as two separate cases of Israel and of Ukraine?
Yeah, thank you. We're talking about this not in 2 years. I think North Korean, Iranian problem, Russian problem, it's about years and years. And Ukraine only 32 years, not in Soviet Union. And collective West fighting these enemies in different ways I think in about 50 years, yeah. But the problem here, why? Because they performing good, and if you estimate their abilities to help each other, you will see that we cannot see now any allies, any troops of our allies on Ukrainian territory, because Western allies understand this like escalating. But we're facing a North Korean troops in the Kursk region, and we have messages from training camps where North Korean troops are training now, and I think in days we will face them on the first line. Um, our problem it's about weakness of uh, Western world. It's pity to say, but now they performing more, they performing better uh, than all the Western allies. I talking about Axis, about Russia and their allies, and uh, you can see how many munitions North Korea sent to Russia, and how many munitions, for example, uh, South Korea sent to us. It now it never happened, but I think if we will face North Koreans on the first line, maybe something will be changed. We have to understand that if we understand that we can have a huge problem, we can multiply our effect on a battlefield by sharing our experience, by targeting uh, mutual targets, not mutual, but common targets, because it's about 1,200 kilometers from Ukrainian side to Iran, and we can deal with this something also with Israel. And I think if we will prolong our war on Ukrainian territory, we will see some new effect if we will have a new ally in Israel. It's not
Thank you very
about
much. Brilliant.
on the factories, but it's about their commanders who doing decisions. It's about logistics, because some components of Shaheds cannot be provided in on a Russian territory. That's why uh, we need uh, strikes on Iranian territory to defend Ukrainian territory.
Yes, that is a brilliant take. Yes, absolutely. Mutual targets. What's important right now for Ukraine is very seemingly can be very important for Israel as well. Or now to you, what's your take?
Absolutely. First, let's maybe hope that what we're doing here tonight would be the first step toward such an alliance. But really, it's becoming very clear that that shared interests are really force multiplier. We can see it how Ukraine is not fighting alone right now. You got dozens of countries headed by the United States supplying Ukraine with economic aid and with the munitions. I don't believe Ukraine would have been able to fight this war without this Western assistance. Roughly, correct me if I'm wrong, roughly 20% of his population moving abroad and doing quite astonishingly well toward a much larger enemy equipped with nuclear weapons. All these things really are astonishing. But I think here in Israel, the way we look at it is that we would like the international community to really consider us the front line of defense of the West in the same way Ukraine is considered. And so far, it hasn't happened. The global discussion around the war in Gaza, for example, has largely depicted Israel somehow committing a genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza, referring to it as an Israel-Hamas war, not seeing the Iranian larger picture of really an Iranian campaign on 7 fronts. Iran itself launching missiles and drones toward Israel. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, Iraqi militias, Iranian militias in Iraq actually launched drones against Israel, killing soldiers, as well as those stationed in Syria. So this is really a campaign, and of course in Judea and Samaria, stirring Palestinians to attempt to murder Israelis. All these things are really formed into one picture, which is an Iranian attempt to destroy the state of Israel. The supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, says so openly. I think maybe the only leader of a country in the world openly calling to destroy another country, perhaps except for Putin of Russia calling to really cancel Ukraine as it is today. But really, Khamenei of Iran openly says our strategic goal is to wipe Israel off the map, and then writing it in Hebrew and in Persian on their missiles. This is something really unheard of and normalized in the international scene to the extent that Israel sometimes gets dozens, even hundreds of condemnations per year by the United Nations, but Iran gets none. It's really quite astonishing that no emergency plenary of the Security Council was ever gathered to discuss Iran's threat to destroy Israel while developing nuclear weapons and funding and leading a seven-front campaign against it, against the Jewish state. And really, the reaction by the West has mostly been supporting Ukraine as long as it takes, pledging for victory, and most recently escalating the conflict, perhaps in a positive way, but escalating the conflict by allowing Ukraine to use long-range U.S.-made missiles against Russia. The European Union saying there is absolutely no option for compromise against Putin. Putin must be defeated on the battlefield. When they look at Israel, they see an entirely different picture. They see a relatively small country surrounded by enemies, and most of what Israel senses it gets is backlash, threats of sanctions, threats of arms embargo. Most recently, Emmanuel Macron of France calling for arms embargo, saying Israel somehow was created thanks to the United Nations and not to its fundamental right to exist. And then, of course, ushering in a whole industry of disinformation. It is normally Russian disinformation that is rightly warned against. But then disinformation provided by Iran and Hamas is kind of normalized and is a matter of everyday life in the international scene. We see how the United Nations uses in its reports data about casualties in Gaza provided by the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is basically Hamas provided data. And somehow they keep mentioning how, for example, 40,000 Palestinians were killed in Gaza when there was no real evidence for that, just numbers provided by Hamas. Claims on somehow starvation in Gaza when over 1 million tons of humanitarian aid were funneled into Gaza over the past year. It's a very peculiar way to carry out the genocide by providing your enemy with fuel and food during wartime. And all these things really are I think that there is a real connecting line between the way Israel sees it, the way Ukraine sees it, which is really the front line of defense against a larger global campaign. And I don't believe, to your question, Benjamin, I don't believe that the international community does this connection enough, meaning that sees the connecting line between Israel and Ukraine as defenders of Western democracies. And it's really evident by the level of support. It's true that the United States provides Israel with really untold support, whether it is projectiles, air defense, ammunition. But then again, the I would call it the ambience or the affect would be pressuring Israel to agree to a ceasefire that would lead us to the next war. But on the other hand, supplying Ukraine with all the weapons it needs to win over Russia. So I only wish that the West saw both cases as equal, provided both with the means to succeed, to really see both as a force multiplier to win over this campaign.
Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. I agree with what you said and highlighted. The international community needs to start engaging the concept of viewing both theaters of conflict as one united front against this growing axis of nefariously acting states supporting a global insurrection against a rules-based order. Whether that be through disinformation or through other economic sabotage cases, and now, of course, for the past few years, not limited to outright war. But on this note, I'll transition to the next question, which is going to acutely examine how it has been for both these countries in the past few years and or year under war, and it's the attacks via strategic munitions. Both countries are heavily affected by regular bombardment, whether it's the standalone cases of Iranian onslaughts of missiles or the day to day experience that Ukraine has with drones combined with strategic munitions. However, uh, going in on this question, it is they have presented an ever growing problem for current air defenses and strategic infrastructure. And what solutions and or problems do you see with the current mindset surrounding air defense? And yes, we'll start with or.
Right, we saw most recently in Iran's attack against Israel only twice in history. The first one ever in history was of a direct attack of Iran on Israel was on late April 14, as we said, and up until that point, Iran preferred to act by means of its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and other armed terrorist militias, and recently on October 1st. So, in both these cases, there was really a dilemma whether Israel would be able to absorb this kind of shock effect on its air defense systems. And since Iran is located roughly in proximity, about 2,000 kilometers away from Israel, it would be actually easier to intercept in many cases. Yes, the Iron Dome deals very well with short and medium range ballistic missiles and rockets, in some cases drones. But then Iran's distance actually allows Israelis to get to the shelter faster. In the Gaza envelope, kibbutzim and towns who were affected were really suffered massacre on October 7. There were Hamas terrorists right inside their homes, while rocket alert time can amount to 10 to 15 seconds. In the north as well, right on the border, there were only a few seconds to seek shelter, while Iran's attacks allowed actually regional based radar systems that are not often talked about, um, really orchestrated by the United States, to give Israel sufficient alert to, for example, most recently sending F-35 airplanes to intercept those drones and cruise missiles um, um, long before they reach their target. And the Arrow 2, Arrow 3 air defense system really do a phenomenal job. Some reports also said that the United States deployed air defense systems in Israeli territory. And while I said how Israel feels neglected or even thrown under the bus, to be blunt, by the international community, it's quite interesting to see how Ukrainians, as I saw it, feel the same way oftentimes, that it could be more air defense supplied by the West. We saw how drones, in some cases, are 30% of the drones launched by Russia in a given day are intercepted, in another day 80%, and really the air defense systems are having a hard time dealing with them. Um, and then, really, it could amount to being resolved by a single solution, which is the laser system. But so long as we don't have it, and no solution will be hermetic, we know that we'll have to um, deal with the root causes of the problem, as you mentioned. The root cause would be the commitment of Iran, Russia, and the other members of the Axis to challenge the West, to challenge the Western hegemony. Russia's commitment to take over Ukraine, Iran's commitment to destroy Israel. All these things need to be addressed at the root cause and neutralize, at least in Iran's case, the root military capabilities for them to even manufacture these weapons in the first place.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, again, we heard a lot about how the more long range threats can be facilitated by Western assets, specifically American and some defenses. However, immediate threats still present a very significant danger to civilian populations. I'll quickly jump over. Vladislav, what's your view on this?
Yeah, thank you. Uh, we'll end this strategic threat with the end of war, because in each day we can face a new threat with cruise missiles, and maybe 2 days ago, it was like, I don't know, 120 of different types of missiles and 90 drones. And now we have some problems with energetic infrastructure, but not such big like in 2022. It's You cannot deal with this because on each answer uh, that you gave to the threat, Russians provide a new question, like using new types of ballistic missiles, multiply effects with cruise missiles, with drones, with recon drones, and also with hypersonic missiles like Zircon. It was 2 days ago, and it was on February, and it's a new level for our air defense. First of all, it's a work that where you have to organize your uh, different types of defense abilities of your country, because it's not only about air defense, it's about um, to put your people in shelters, to provide ability to find Russian agents on in your town. It's also about build up defense in big cities like Kharkiv, when you also have only 30 seconds to hide from ballistic missile, from this type of strike. And also you have the biggest territory in Europe with factories, with energetic infrastructure, and also one cruise missile uh, was intercepted 2 days ago in our in Carpathians, in mountains. We doesn't have any factory here, or maybe energetic infrastructure, but Russians have some intent in this place, and you have to be able to deal with this. We're seeking new solutions with our allies. It may be good to use air component, maybe on the western part of Ukraine, air component of NATO. Um, but also we're going underground. We have three schools underground in Kharkiv. We have some factories who went underground, and it improved their results, and faces no threat from rocket missiles, from missiles in the months. And the main threat now, it's about terror against civilian people. Uh, we have 10 people died in Sumy, 10 people died in Odessa in 2 days. It was usual civilian buildings, and I think terror against civilians, it's a new way of warfare, and it will not be ended because it's effective. After these casualties, after this tragedy, people start talking, and it's not an air defense anymore. It's about politics. That's why Russia will do this again and again. And that's why we need some patriots. That's why we need F-16, and it was a good example on in Carpathians when this cruise missile, was intercepted by F-16, and no one was killed. Uh, that's why we're facing, I think, a biggest terror attack in 2.5 years, uh, provided by professional army with professional weapon, sometimes Sovietic weapon, in attack that was 2 days ago. Some cruise missiles, modern cruise missiles, have old Soviet engines, and it's uh, it's good news, but we have to stand another and another time.
Yes, thank you. Well, as we've heard from both sides, neither adversary is shying away from terrorizing the civilian population. And that seems to be a fact that we just have to accept and wage our wars with a higher moral standard than our enemies. But on that note, I will go to the last question. Having acknowledged the differences and commonalities in both theaters of conflict and regarding adversaries as well, uh, what specific commonalities are there to observe, and what lessons do you think are there for you to share and for you to learn from one another? Um, or let's start with you. My apologies.
Right. So I think for Israelis, it's very clear. They are the front line of defense against the radical axis. Um, we saw how in the past year, the Iranian axis, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and the rest managed to shoot over 32,000 rockets, missiles, and drones at Israeli territory. There were over 1,700 Israeli fatalities by these attacks, of which 900 civilians. The largest terrorist attack in Israeli history happened on October 7, and ever since Israel understood it is conducting a multi front war against an enemy determined and committed to destroy it. And so, if the strategic, I would say, national security paradigm of Israel up until October 7 was kicking the can down the road, postponing the next war, and hoping to somehow dissuade or deter the enemy on the other side of the fence not to launch a full scale war, we saw how this strategy of containment has failed to provide because of Iran's commitment to destroy Israel. But we can also see how in Ukraine, um, who did not see this war coming, did not expect it to be launched on February 2022, has seen quite a marvelous popular, I would say, drafting and recruitment to the military. We saw the same way in Israel. People who were abroad, they did not flee Israel. I think Israel is the one country in the world where people do not flee and during wartime, but actually come back to and recruit people who were on vacation and bought plane tickets last minute and joined their. And by the evening, they were already fighting with their reserve unit. And I think this really tells a lot about both Israeli and Ukrainian societies. The People's Army model that is really irreplaceable. We saw how in many Western armies, conscription was a thing of the past, but now in light of the war in Ukraine and the war in Israel, it's reconsidered. And to be honest, Israel sees it as an existential war right now, and some international pressure to simply accept a ceasefire, to accept its destiny to face deadly wars every year, every several months, is simply out of the question at this point. I mean, Israel understood that in the cost benefit analysis, it is willing to pay the cost, but to finish the job. And so Ukraine, I think, is committed to the same thing. And so, yes, on the negative side, we saw the cooperation between Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, all committed to the struggle against the West, with Israel and Ukraine being the front lines. Iranian drones, Iranian missiles kill both Israelis and Ukrainians. So we see these commonalities on the negative side. We also see how Russia and China and Iran conduct the first ever military maneuver in the Persian Gulf last March. So all these things are very concerning, but we can also see the positive side. And in my opinion, this is the big opportunity from this campaign. Both theaters of war where Israel and Ukraine understand um, one, they need strong people's army, and there is no substitute for strategic autonomy, meaning they must defend themselves by themselves. But also, two, an international and regional cooperation can be a very significant force multiplier. We saw, for example, how European nations opened their doors to Ukrainian refugees and also help Ukraine with weapons. Some would say insufficiently, but they do participate and they're committed. Israelis would love to see it um, more when it comes to them being committed for Israel's victory over Iran and its access rather than disseminating disinformation, pressuring it on the United Nations stage. And the prize here, if Israel wins this war decisively crushes Hamas, crushes Hezbollah, neutralizes Iran's nuclear program, neutralizes Iran's missile program, all these things we saw how it opens the door for regional cooperation. The recent Iranian attacks, regional Arab nations actually helped Israel with intelligence, with the radars and the U.S. Patriot missiles and stationed in their territory. We saw how Saudi Arabia was on the verge of normalizing relations with Israel, and I strongly believe that only if Israel wins this war decisively will Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries around the region will join the Abraham Accords and sign a peace treaty with Israel, because that's the kind of region we're living in. You only make peace with a side that is winning and a side that is determined. And so we have shared interests with the Arab world. We both fear Iran and are alarmed by Iran and its commitment to take over the Middle East. And I think if Israel and Ukraine cooperate more, really cooperate with military aid and so on, that would allow us to make the case to the international community that we're fighting the same enemy. Israel has refrained from doing that, quite as we know, for a variety of reasons, mostly not to be in bad terms with Russia. But we are beginning to live in a world where you don't have any common sense, interest based, I would say, cold relations anymore, like Israel used to have with Russia. You are stepping toward a world that is increasingly divided. And in that world, everybody will have to make their choices. And I think the European Union, the United States, and the rest of the free world will have to stand with Israel and with Ukraine against the common enemy.
Thank you. Yeah. As we heard, it's a question of resolve. It's a question of perspective, seeing the issues that we're experiencing, the conflicts, to the right perspective. Yet again, coming back to this phrase of the united front against this axis. And now to you, Vladislav, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah. Um, if you will ask any soldier in our armed forces uh, which side you will choose on Israel-Iranian war, you understand that you will have 100% of answer like we will fight for Israel. We have common values. We are from one side of the world, and we can build up one front because we have one common enemy. Like what the way will be, I don't know. We can build some factories with producing FPV drones because we have so much experience in this. We can show our experience in providing electronic warfare against all the types of Iranian drones, Iranian Russian drones, and I think we can face our enemy together, and we can win.
Well, thank you. That was a short but very meaningful statement, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. And now, just to reflect on this for the audience, yes, absolutely. We hear from both sides that the resolve and the will can be found in the men and the country that make up the fighting will. And it's very great to hear that, and I hope this is a first of many discussions on this topic. Now, we'll deviate a little bit to the questions from the audience, where the question is, how will the Trump presidency affect Ukraine? And in this case, we'll also ask the same question with regards to Israel from Or. But Vladislav, your opinion on the Trump presidency with regards to Ukraine?
Yeah, you have to remember one thing. First Western weapon that we received in this war in 2016 was when Trump was elected first time. That's why we don't have any circumstances with this. We understand that it's our old allies who will fight and who will never end uh, all the programs of aiding Ukraine. That's why I think it's not about ending a war in end of January. No, it's about something huge, about providing new entente or new bunch of allies of because we will face the same enemies in Taiwan. And I'm happy to share my experience for my Australian, also Taiwan friends, share experience in using FPV drones against Russians, because our Taiwan friends will face Russians in 2 or 3 years, and the new administration understand this. That's why I think it will be a good future for both for Ukraine and US.
All right, these are amazing comments. And without further ado, Or, your take.
Right. So look, Israel traditionally works with both sides of the aisle when it comes to U.S. politics, and it never really wanted to take sides, neither Democrat or Republican. I will say that the past year was challenging for Israel, and the new Trump administration, it does provide some optimism. Yes, President Biden fully backed Israel in public statements, in providing really untold and unprecedented amount of weapons. Most recently, a $14 billion aid package Congress approved. And of course, helping Israel on the international stage. All these things are extremely not only appreciated, they are priceless, and they prove the commitment, not just the Biden administration, the United States as a country, as really as a civilization, to be on Israel's side. That being said, yes, there was an unprecedented, some would say even unaccepted, level of pressure on Israel to accept a ceasefire, to accept a hostage deal that would not bring all the hostages home. They will simply leave Hamas in place and turn the hourglass back to the next October 7. Statements just yesterday, Netanyahu revealed in the Knesset that the Biden administration threatened to withhold weapons if Israel launched operations in Rafah. That's something President Biden said publicly, but it was also said in behind closed doors, and much more, I would say, ferociously or punctually than what the open statements that were said, delaying the delivery of arms. So all these things, and of course pressuring to accept a two-state solution that Israel simply cannot accept, having a terrorist state right on its doorstep. So all these things really accumulate to a very complicated relationship. And the Trump administration now, I think, will have to see, but to judge by the first term, and the people who are being appointed, candidates who are being appointed to serve in key roles in the upcoming administration, it seems like it has a clear moral compass. Uh, People like Mike Huckabee, Elise Stefanik, Pete Hegseth, people who were open about their unequivocal support for Israel and the Jewish people's right to live here, and of course um, um, if you look strategically, providing Israel with as much arms it needs to finish the job as fast as it can. And I think that's what needs to be in front of Trump's eyes right now, to provide Israel whatever it needs to finish the job. And in my opinion, it should also include a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities and missile program. We can never really finish up this war while the Iranian threat is looming on Israel, on the entire Middle East. It will throw the entire Middle East. If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, it will throw the entire Middle East into instability, an arms race, nuclear arms race, and the United States' interest to maintain stability, free global trade, navigation routes. All of these things will be in jeopardy, and I think Trump understands that, and the seeming picture is that Israel will have an easier time working with the administration. It will need support to finish the job in this war, to get to a decisive result, and normalize relations with the rest of the Arab world. I think it's within reach.
Well, then, thank you very much. Overarchingly, then, a positive outlook for the Trump administration. Hopeful, hopes are high, but as we know, only time will tell. And then, as regards this entire panel, gentlemen, thank you very much. It has been an amazing discussion. I hope, as I said previously, this discussion as a platform is a first of many, and I hope it repeats itself globally, as this is truly an important perspective for the international community to realize this united front that both Israel and Ukraine are facing against this axis. So once again, thank you very much, or
Thank you.
thank you for your participation and for your insight.
Thank you very much.
Vladislav, equally, thank you very much. All right, gentlemen, we'll be closing off. And for your audience, thank you very much for attending. Thank you for the questions. Hope to see you again soon. Have a lovely, pleasant evening.